Welcome back, everyone. If you can bring others who are standing outside, you can continue. Hold your thoughts, as we say usually. Hold your thoughts. Okay, we are starting a little bit late, 10 minutes late, or because we were going to start at 2:50. So we're going to make it up with some presentations that are happening. So Georg Sarafian, Georg Janures. Okay, I'm going to rely on you. You make up for the time. Okay. Now we are moving forward. It's part 2 of the summit. As we all know, the main objective is unicorns position Armenia. For today, at the end of the conference, we're going to say unicorns position Armenia, M&A positions Armenia, employee stock options programs position Armenia, digital Julfa positions Armenia. As you could see, the plan quadrupled. We're going to combine all this. Why? Because it's going to take shorter time to achieve something extraordinary. Multiple, quadruple, and even more growth for the Armenian economy and for Armenian nation globally. Something new Julfa people achieved. We're going to repeat that. We're going to establish it. So moving forward, as we kept saying, building wealth, how we are going to build wealth. It's not only government wealth, it's not only company wealth, it's people wealth. For that reason, we built this special panel to talk about employee stock options program. And a great surprise, we have actually several consulting firms, companies who are proactively promoting that culture to many companies. I'm going to invite the next panel. The power employee stock options for enabling the growth and startup and building future millionaires. Directly, millionaires. We mean it. Alexander Sharikian, partner, head of advisory at BDO Armenia, is going to moderate the panel. Welcome to the stage, Alexander. We had slotted for Vahe Antonians. As you may remember, he actually got sick after his trip. He couldn't join, but hopefully Alexander has some messaging from Vahe he will share. Naira Petrosyan couldn't join, who is a director of legal services, but we do have a replacement. Alexander, you will introduce, please. Who is replacing Naira?
Yes, so first, in place of Vahe, we have Ankur Gupta, who is going to add his global perspective on ESOPs. For replacing Naira Petrosyan, I have another great colleague here, Harun Chilingayan, who is head of our legal and tax practice.
Thank you so much. See, this has been very operative, immediate replacements. Well done. Thank you, Alexander. Ashot Tonoyan, Managing Director at Service Titan Armenia. Welcome, Ashot. The unicorn, he's representing, not unicorn, it's getting closer to decacorn. Ashot Jan, well done, thank you. And David Sargsyan, Director at Legal, Ameria Bank. David, welcome. Alexander, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Emma. This is great to hear so many people interested in the agenda. And I would like to start with congratulations on the 2nd anniversary of the Orion and for putting together such an important agenda. I think the impression, I hope the impression of the participants is that it's really well organized and the topic sequence is really importantly selected and relevant. So we started from the discussion of the ecosystem. Then we went into the M&A. Now we are tapping another key topic on the, as a milestone for the ecosystem, which is the employee stock ownership plan. I use the word ownership because there are different types of the actually stock incentive plans. ESOP as an option plan is one of them. There is ESPP, RSU, plenty of them. So the idea of this panel is to elaborate whether what role can play different tools of giving some stocks and options to employees in building a great company and spinning off millionaires after successful M&A or IPO. So this is more a talent elaboration panel. With that in mind, first let me properly introduce the replacement we have. You see the pictures on the bottom, and you see, oh my God, it was a mess up with this panel. So no worries, everything is fine under Emma's, Arman's, and the team's control, as usual, right? So Ankur Gupta is a great colleague, is a founder of Ignite Ventures and Ignite Consulting. He's been working for quite some time with tech firms, focusing on fintech, enterprise tech, and Web3 stuff. Aaron Chilingayan is a partner and head of tax and legal practice at BDO Armenia. And Ashot is already introduced, right? So with this background set it up, let me turn to Ankur with the first question. As we see, ESOPs are pretty common in developed ecosystems and play a unique role. What are your thoughts on specific importance and role they are playing in putting together great teams and making such a teams which are going to really deliver?
Alex. Yeah, so what we see commonly in most startup ecosystems is these days we see there is quite a big issue of employee churn and employee turnover. So as a startup leader, one of the most important things that you have at your hand is to accumulate or build a team which believes in that mission that you are leading on. Now, as a leader, you will articulate that mission every time you're trying to hire what we call as a star hire. But articulation of the mission goes only so far. There are certain extrinsic motivations that need to be in place. And this is where the startup ESOP options or ownership plans make a huge difference, because effectively they are a way to align a firm's interest with employees' interest. Now, I should mention that a lot of companies do think that by offering stock options or by offering any kind of stock ownership plans, we can offer employees lower compensation, but they are not effective in acting as a replacement of salary. They do play a part as being a crucial incentive. In terms of the effect what ownership plans have, there has been some studies, and from practice as well, what I often observe is they play a huge part in the employee retention, because ownership plans typically have certain cliffs built in terms of the vesting that happens. And what we see is as employees who are committed to the future growth of the company, they are more inclined to stay longer in an organization. And preserving talent, I think, is one of the most important things that any startup leader needs to really focus on today. So they play a huge part.
Thank you, Ankur. Actually, in economics, there is a term which is principal-agent conflict, and it's widely discussed in terms of ESOPs as well, where principal is a firm, agent is a management and staff. Do you really think ESOPs has a power to align interests in a level where you avoid principal-agent conflict, or to what extent you think it can really avoid that issue?
I think in case of startups, what we're seeing now is more and more employees, and it is not just the key, let's say, executive management or the management of an organization, which is being given the chance to own the equity in the company. It is, I mean, one of the most common types of employees who are part of the such ownership plans is the actual technical teams. So with the rise of so many companies going through IPOs, most of the people see this as a way to take part in that significant rise in the valuation that these companies which have a huge potential and may attract or may gain a pretty large market share will eventually become significantly valued on any of the public markets. So from that perspective, instead of a conflict, I think it works as a benefit for the principal agent, which is a firm itself, because you're essentially giving the employee a way to work for themselves, because they are working for their own success rather than you having to define every single hour or every single duty that they have to do.
Thanks, and we'll get back to that shortly. Let me turn to Ashot from Service Titan. I mean, we all heard about Service Titan. It was one of the success stories. It's one of few unicorns, and we are proud of that, meanwhile. So what ESOP's role was in the path of becoming a tech giant? So Service Titan grows significantly, I mean, and the year-on-year growth, if you count, is really crazy. So do you think it has a specific role to play, or that was just one of the potential benefits you offered to the staff? And one more additional question. I'm not sure whether you are going to answer directly, but no worries. Have you counted how many millionaires are going to spin off after your successful exit IPO, I mean? Probably, right?
I'll answer the second question first. No.
It was expected, meanwhile.
Regarding the first question, I think what it comes down to is, like, nowadays when there are so many successful companies out there, they're all for the stock options, etc. And as a startup, if you want to succeed, you are looking for the smartest people. And I think it's natural that smart people can do the maths themselves and then figure out what is more beneficial, and you want to be competitive in that. And so we heard, like, from the perspective of startup, but if we look from the perspective of the teams, of the employees, I think life is short, and you have to be wise where you're investing it. And I think it's too short to be simply get a job for paying the bills, and then 5 years pass, 10 years pass, and basically you're nowhere like progress, so to say. And I think the stock options are a really interesting way of, you live your life, you pay your bills, and along the way time passes, and it's not like for nothing. So at some point, maybe you are very likely also to retire very well.
So you mean now looking a bit back, you realize that, like, people are seeing the value in that in a long-term perspective. I mean, like, how they are treating that, because that's something far. If we go back to early days of Service Titan, probably you implemented it from somewhere from the early days, or maybe later. Anyways, I mean, what was people's perception when they've been getting that on hand? Is it something very far, or it's something you can count in when you are projecting your assets and liabilities, I mean, a personal finance-wise?
There's probably a difference where we are talking of, if we, let's say, take the US market, probably from school they already know what stock options, they understand the value, and it's not like because they get like better education on stock options, it's just they see real life examples. They see people owning stock options, and then they see the outcomes after a number of years, so to say. We don't have too many examples here. That's why for people here it's it's a bit hard to imagine like what is the potential outcome. Frankly, it's been easier to attract people with more cash rather than more equity, but that is starting to shift. And when Surge Titan opened here 3.5 years ago, yeah, back then it was probably 99% didn't even imagine what is stock option. And but we entered the market. We have this company-wide policy. Everybody in the company has equity, is eligible for equity, and over time, that trend is starting to become the norm. So I've seen other companies who are doing the same, and over time, and once we get to a point when there is an exit event, and people start seeing that those options materialize, so the generation after that, they will have much better understanding and they will appreciate basically stock options more.
I mean, I realize I'm touching sensitive questions and topics, so it's fine. Let me turn to David from Ameria Bank. I mean, Ameria Bank is one of the largest banks, and as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, David, Ameria Bank, I mean not Ameria Bank, but Ameria implemented some sort of stock incentive way back prior to the launch of the bank, and it can be considered as one of the pioneers in Armenian ecosystem of giving such incentives to staff. And now, standing in the crossroads of 2020, looking back and into the future, how such a large bank as Ameria is tackling the challenge of employees' reward and retention?
We have been implementing the system for many years, and this was not just the story of the bank. Actually, the process itself has begun in our advisory roots, and basically Ameria CGSC, which was having a group of different companies, have been implementing this concept on shareholder level within the group meaning of it, because there was nothing in the regulations, there was nothing in the legislation, and there was unfortunately nothing in the culture. So basically we have transferred that culture, thanks to our shareholders, to the level of the shareholding at the bank, which I think is very important for all the arguments which my colleagues stated here, including retention, loyalty, motivation, etc. But for me, the most important thing is the change of culture. Because in my understanding that such a system, when it has been rooted into the culture, it changes the education, it changes the perception, and it gives a lot of more than you can imagine to the ordinary people who are at the beginning of the road. Of course, our system is not all inclusive, is ESOP. Actually, it was basically institutionalized after we have our international shareholders joining the Ameria Bank, namely EBRD and ADB. So basically our employees now have around 11% in the bank, which is a big number for the standards and for the culture in Armenia. But what is important is the message which receives any Armenian entering the company, that at some level you will be the part of not only the shareholding but the decision making. And that is the most important message we are delivering, that you, being even junior, is a project manager. You is the decision maker, and you have a chance to formalize your role in the upper levels of the management, growing through this culture. So for me, it's a matter of culture and education, which I do hope that will spread around the country, and we will have our Armenian perception of the business being family business turned into the professional business, which benefits both the family members, its successors, and employees as well.
Thank you, David. You brought a very important perspective of culture, and we also believe that tools like ESOP, solutions like ESOP, go deep into the root of the firm, culture-wise. That's very important. And 11% is significant, let me tell you. I mean, startups are usually going with somewhere 10, 15, but that's our startups from early days. And Ameria is one of the largest banks, I mean, large bank, to be honest, in the country. So 11 is significant. I will get back with more questions. Let me turn to my good colleague, Aharon. We at Video been quite into these for recent years. Putting forces from our global offices as well to help couple companies in the country to implement the proper ESOPs. When we look at the firm, I mean, at the initial stage, as soon as they think about going to global venture capital funds, the thing they have in mind is ESOP to be implemented, because global VC funds are going to ask about that, and that's important to have. What do you think on the, I mean, given the video's experience and your rich experience, do you think like Armenian current legal ecosystem and tax ecosystem as well is friendly toward talents, especially those which are getting their options in other domicile country like US, Delaware, but living and staying here in Armenia? Is our ecosystem really friendly towards this type of the firm, which is, I mean, actually literally in the ecosystem, that's the flagship and mainstream?
Thank you very much. My impression and understanding is that legislation is not comprehensive here. For example, last time we did an amendment in law on companies, on joint stock companies, but there was no amendment in limited liability companies law. So it's open, fully open. And the next, I would say, strange thing is that looking at labor code, it permits to discuss and analyze what is happening when the Armenian legal entity is distributing or granting options for his employees. And there is no distinction for foreign companies, American, European, etc., distributing that, granting that options or stocks to employees of filials or representative offices here in Armenia. And labor code in first case regards this as a just bonus, as part of salary, part of wages. And I think it has to be discussed one more time and understand whether it is good, whether it is supporting this movement. And that's why it is important to change it, discuss it.
Thank you. Let me throw a couple more questions and see who wishes to take. So, I mean, recently, given the regional developments, we have a large flow of people from Russia, Belarus, Ukraine into Armenia, and these are high-quality professionals. So what are your thoughts? I think it will be good to hear Ashot's and David's thoughts on this. What are your thoughts, like first from their perspective, how good the opportunities compared to their ecosystems from your understanding? I mean, both in like the tech firms, we do provide opportunities as well as from the legal perspectives. I know David's background is in legal, as well as from the country's perspective. I mean, tech ecosystems perspective. Do they have to play a role in shaping future of the Armenian tech sector? What do you think?
So you meant the opportunity for them or for us?
From both angles, actually.
Yeah, I think in the region we are probably the most developed and sophisticated tech ecosystem, and there are many statistics backing that. And but for us, it's a huge opportunity. It's an influx of professionals, and doesn't matter whether they will stay or how long they will stay, it will have its footprint. And in terms of connections, in terms of experience, and even cultural exchange. And I think that's something that we are not too much excelling at, having this diverse cultures coming and going, having this traffic. So yeah, probably the only diversity here are either local Armenians or diasporan Armenians. That's the main population. And yeah, I think I'm seeing it positive from every angle.
Any service titan-wise, any group reallocations to Armenia, anything, and any real feedbacks from such people, if there is such a case?
Yes, so we are working with a company that was based out of Russia, so the company relocated to Armenia, and then we are currently also directly employing part of those people, and there are people who prefer to go elsewhere, which is fine, and there are people who like it, who would like to stay. But I think as a country, for us, this is also like an interesting challenge to level up how ready we are to welcome other communities or people, professionals from abroad. And for example, we have a huge gap in the real estate market. And I think next time another influx come in, we will probably have better instruments in place to make the process smoother, less bureaucracy, less fraud and things like that. And it's a learning opportunity.
Yeah, these type of things give us good lessons on how important is infrastructure. I mean, even like real estate, who thinks that real estate is going to play a vital role? But it plays, or seems it play. David, what are your thoughts on this?
Basically, it was interesting that after this famous February 24th event, I was getting the first calls from Moscow from friends, whom friends were reallocating to Armenia, etc. And I met some of them, and it was, the notion of refugee is something different. And I began my professional career at UN Agency for Refugees as a lawyer. So that it was kind of, coming back to the roots. So I met certain families, and I can tell you some of them from advisory, business, even Bado representatives. So it was quite interesting, moving them to Armenia. What the challenges are. In my opinion, there is no major cultural difference, but there is still a way of cultural enrichment from these people. So I'm not very certain on Armenia onboarding some of them, but I have seen already some employees with only Russian background, so I assume those are persons who are buying into the Armenia concept, and hopefully they will be enriching our culture. For the same time, connecting with the topic of our panel, I can tell that the companies which have the options and shares and this element, they have bigger chances to have more success in retaining such talents, because you can buy in them by having them as a shareholder at some level. So I assume that this is a good opportunity for our businesses to to go behind the Armenian boundaries in terms of internal corporate governance and corporate enrichment. And I hope that both the nation and the government of Armenia will benefit from this, and will know how to benefit from this. So this is, for me, the lessons learned each day, and we need to copy with that. For the same time, I would like to add one issue that, in my understanding, our notion and culture of the ESPS and ESOP in the companies implemented is far ahead of the legislative developments in Armenia. In my opinion, legislation of Armenia was always in advance of the community because of the educational standards, etc. But in this case, the legislation catch up. And there is a lot of to do, because in 2-3 years, if no changes, it will hinder the development of ESOP in Armenia, especially with having this cultural enrichment coming from different backgrounds.
Thank Thank you, David. That's a good point to bring into the discussion. The legislation catch up with the forefronts of the real developments in the field. Yes, Aaron, go ahead, please. Yeah.
David said, I think looking at our experience, working with several new companies here, the challenge is in our Armenian legislation, there is no regulations for multinationals. I mean, for the group. And we face that problem each day. So they work with different centers over the world. And they used to make and distribute services from different places. And in Armenia, we want to have that employee employed here in Armenia or have a civil contract, etc. It may bring difficulties. The second thing is, I just compare what Ashot said. It's a kind of a guarantee for employees for their retirement age. I'm going to compare it with the special pension system which exists in Armenia, and it's a funded pension system, Pillar 2. So it's kind of competitors here, and we have to think how to align them. It's important. Thank you.
Meanwhile, that's a very good point, because the assets under management of the pension funds just hit 1 billion. So it means that that reform back, as I remember already some 15 years, correct me if I'm wrong, is working. 10 years, sorry, yeah. Okay, let me turn to Ankur with a question on the importance of having exit strategy in place. I mean, you've been working for startups for quite some time, and there were some exits, I believe. So what do you think, I mean, it's from early days, it's tough to plan exit for a startup, and we had such thoughts in one of previous panels. But still, yeah, there are thoughts that these potential cohort of firms could be interested because they are in the same sector, etc. Right? But do you think like it correlates highly with the motivation of people? I mean, if someone is getting ESOP and she knows that the firm has a clear exit strategy, does it make any difference?
So it definitely does make a big difference. But just elaborating on that point, when you join a startup, and I'm saying, you know, by startup we mean companies which range from early seed stage all the way to growth stage. So it can be anywhere in that duration. And the earlier on that journey you join that company, the less clarity you are going to have about any exit strategy. I mean, if a founder says, I have an exit strategy at seed stage, then you know that's not true. So, and I've personally been a part of a company which was not that early, but it was still relatively at the early stage. And at that time, the most important thing, which I think as an employee, and now looking at it from the employer perspective as well, I can say is the most important thing is how much the employees believe in your mission, because the exit strategy does not exist. And as the ESOP plans are typically multi-year plans, as more and more options are getting vested and you're coming closer to the end of that term, the clearer the exit strategy is, or the more trust is in the mission, the lesser you see the rise in the churn rate. Otherwise, you see a bunching effect where, let's imagine if it's a 4-year vesting cycle, you will, and you can look at stats from any of the companies, you will typically see a sudden rise in the change in the companies at the end of the term, whether it's a 12-month, 24-month, 36-month. So that bunching of turnover gets reduced if there is a clear path to exit. Because if you have some options that are vested as an employee and there is a clear path to exit, that's a very, very good position to be in. And I'm sure nobody would want to destroy that, and they would want to encash on that. But then there could be another case where you're coming to the end of that vesting cycle, but the startup still is not ready for IPO. And we see some companies which deliberately delay their IPOs because they still want to capture larger market share despite being multi-unicorn valuation. But in those cases, I think what works in employees or employers' favor is that from an employee perspective, they know that this company is going to go places. They already are valued at multi-billion, so they are going to have some form of exit. So there is that element of retention that continues in that case.
You say, have a clear mission, no worries that exit strategy is not clear yet, right?
That I think is the most important thing. I think you cannot replace that with the exit strategy, without the exit strategy. I mean, having an exit strategy as a startup is an extremely good position to be in. And it's not just having a strategy on paper. It needs to be demonstratable in the way the market looks at your organization as well. Because, as a founder, you always believe you are going to have an exit.
Thank you. So we have a bit time. Let me open the floor for questions. We have great audience. I believe there are thoughts. So please throw a couple questions and let's try to tackle them. Yeah, sir, yeah. Would you mind maybe, just summarizing with the microphone, please? Sorry.
Question is, at which point startups start to hire people and share ESOP plan with them? At which stage it's more appropriate for the startup to do that? Thank you.
Please, Ashot, would you want to go first?
Yeah, day one.
Answers. They are clear, right? Any additional thoughts? I mean, any additional thought would be challenging, right? After this, right? Okay. Any other questions, please? Yes, sir. Can we? Do I have a question? Sorry. Okay. Was a hand raised. No questions. Okay, I think we are done. We are on time. We saved maybe some 3-4 minutes. Thank you very much for your attention.